What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Friday, February 24th, 2017. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, and ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Quick little program reminder, the lovely Lady Claire will not be joining us in hour number 3. She's still resting up from this little medical whoopsie that she had on Wednesday, and so she's just going to take it easy for the weekend. She will be back next week, of course, and all will be well. Now then, getting right into the news here, Donald Trump is still leading the charge against the corporate media fake news. It's open warfare now between the corporate media and pretty much the rest of us. And Trump is out there making some valid points that the corporate media is putting out all these stories with these fantastic claims, always based on anonymous sources, unnamed officials, and we're supposed to just accept that these unnamed anonymous officials are being perfectly truthful and that the corporate media is vetting them and double-checking. And, of course, we know from the long record of bogus stories we have been getting from the corporate media, that is simply not true. That is simply not true. And Donald Trump has started referring to CNN as the Clinton News Network, which is certainly something that's been called before. And apparently, Donald Trump has escalated the situation where we are getting a word from government slaves that the White House is now barring CNN, the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, and Politico from White House briefings, or at least from today's White House off-camera briefing. But Breitbart, Fox News, Washington Times, and One American News Network were invited in. So that is definitely a slap in the face, and the corporate media is throwing tantrums out there. How dare you? It's traditional that you allow the corporate media to filter the words of the president to the American people. Now, one of the stories that is out there all over the corporate media is how Donald Trump has revoked protections for transgendered students. Oh, and almost like one of those Conan O'Brien videos. The headlines are identical all across the corporate media. They all came from the same source. Trump is revoking protections for transgender students. That isn't what happened. Okay, first of all, transgender students have the same rights that we all do under Title IX, passed back in 1972, that bars discrimination based on gender, and federal court rulings have affirmed that gender discrimination extends to people who are not really sure which way they're going. What Trump actually did was revoke Obama's executive orders where transgenders can use whichever restroom they want to use, which has led to all kinds of problems. But apparently, to the liberals, the right to use whatever restroom you want is being revoked, and that's a threat to the transgendered. All right. Another piece of fake news, as you know, CPAC is going on. Donald Trump made a speech there. And looking at the reaction versus when he spoke to them roughly a year ago when he was really getting into his campaign, it's obvious that he has won the hearts and minds of ordinary conservatives across America. But at one point there were people waving these Russian flags with the name Trump on them, obviously a plant. But the corporate media ran it saying, see, Russia's supporting Trump. Russia's supporting Trump. You can't tolerate a president who's friends with Russia. And they're still layering it on. At this point, I'm surprised anybody is still watching the corporate media. They've been cut off from access to the White House, which means anything that they're going to be saying about what Trump is doing is going to be second, third-hand hearsay. Now, CNN is displaying its ire over being kicked out of the briefing today by saying they may not attend the White House Correspondents' Dinner. And MSNBC is out there saying we haven't decided if we're going to attend the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Like anybody really cares if they show up. Maybe the corporate media is finally getting that good dose of humble they have been so desperately in need for. Meanwhile, despite all the brouhaha and firestorm of fantasy coming out of the corporate media. Trump's approval rating has climbed 5% this last week. And ordinary Americans are with the president, and they're very much against this establishment and the establishment media, which was the message from the election. And that is spreading all over the world. Now, Donald Trump has called the FBI on the carpet for being unable to stop all these leaks from inside the White House. And it really is out of control because apparently the State Department wrote an anti-leak memo which was immediately leaked to the Washington Post. So I think Trump needs to find just one of the leakers and make a real example out of them. Crucifixion on the front lawn or maybe over in Lafayette Park. And send a message. This is not going to be tolerated anymore. Now then, we're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And the leaks don't always get the results the leakers would like to have. There was that Trump tape that was leaked out that ruined Billy Bush. And apparently Matt Lauer didn't like him, felt he was a liability. NBC thought it would derail Trump, and so a staffer on the Today Show leaked that infamous Trump tape. And it did crush Billy, but of course it had no effect on Donald Trump whatsoever. Now, as we reported yesterday, James O'Keefe has dropped a major boulder on the toes of CNN by releasing these audio files, which, among other things, show that CNN has been lying to you, the American people, about polling results. And, of course, we all got a demonstration of that last year during the election season when the corporate media was out there, oh, Hillary's ahead. Hillary's going to win in a landslide. Trump's hardly showing up there. Trump should drop out. Hillary's way ahead. And, of course, Trump won the election. And CNN is now dealing with these audios from an internal mole going all the way back to 2009, and apparently there's still more of these tapes about to come on out. So, of course, the corporate media's response is, oh, you can't trust James O'Keefe. He makes this stuff up. He's a fraud. And you need to remember that James O'Keefe's acid attack expose led to 3 domestic terrorists being arrested. This information is factual. Well, all he's doing is he's getting people on camera who are admitting to doing what they're doing, being paid to protest, engaging in election fraud, voter suppression. He got that all. And what he's got now is absolutely accurate. It's coming from a mole inside CNN. And CNN probably is starting to feel like the White House right now because apparently over at victoriouslibertas.com, they're claiming they have a CNN insider leaking to them, basically talking about collusion between John McCain, Lindsey Graham, Tom Cotton, and Wolf Blitzer and Tapper trying to get negative information onto the corporate media about Donald Trump. And apparently the talking points against Trump are handed down by Jeff Zucker, and his lapdog is Brian Stelter. And apparently the rank and file at CNN are very angry that they are being tarnished as pushing fake news, but that, of course, is what they're being told to do. Now, apparently John Podesta, who is no longer Hillary Clinton's campaign manager, has a new job. He's been hired at the Washington Post. Gee, I wonder if he's going to be objective and unbiased in his reporting. Over at the New York Times, the New York Slimes, they're in full panic mode at word that Donald Trump may be on the verge of issuing an executive order that declares the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization. And that is a big problem because the Muslim Brotherhood has been held up as one of the moderate rebel groups deserving of U.S. support against anybody the deep state wants to get rid of and replace with a puppet regime, such as Bashar al-Assad. If Trump declares them a terrorist organization, that makes it a crime to support them. And a lot of the funding and supplies are going to be cut off, at least the overt. The covert supply will remain. Now, this practice of trying to pick off Trump's lieutenants and support is continuing because, according to a story over at 12160, apparently a group of law professors have filed a misconduct complaint against Kellyanne Conway, saying that she has brought shame upon the legal profession. It's all very murky. They're not actually pointing to any crime that she's committed, any law that she's broken. But it's just another way of trying to create a controversy over Trump's supporters in an effort to pry them loose, to get Trump to kick them out the way he did Michael Flynn, which I think was still a mistake because it's only encouraging these people to go on playing these kind of games. Now, up in New York City, Mayor Bill de Blasio is meeting with federal prosecutors today. Apparently, they're investigating whether people involved in fundraising for his election campaign broke corruption laws. Now, de Blasio is looking at re-election this November, and he keeps saying he's done nothing wrong, and he's cooperating with the investigators. He's saying, my team did everything right. Well, he may have, because we've been hearing word that Hillary Clinton is thinking of running for mayor of New York this November, and she's a Democrat. And in order to get her way cleared to that mayorship, she needs to get de Blasio out. So this may be a Hillary Clinton hatchet job. Remember, people who are competing for the same offices that Hillary Clinton is, bad things happen to them. Like when John F. Kennedy Jr. was going to declare for that same Senate seat that Hillary Clinton eventually won. And his plane just fell out of the air mysteriously. Now, if you go back to some of my articles like The Epic of Clinton's Mess, and we talk about Chinagate, which I've often cited as justification for asking if Hillary Clinton, while Secretary of State, was selling U.S. secrets to foreign interests using her weak email server to deliver the goods and her so-called charitable foundation to collect and launder the money. And the precedent that I use to justify that question is Chinagate, which is when Bill Clinton was running for re-election, he used his authority as president to authorize the sale to China of very sensitive technology with military applications over the objections of the Defense Department and the intelligence community. At the same time, huge amounts of money were pouring into his re-election campaign fund from Chinese-American citizens who, as it turned out, were acting as fronts for money originating in China itself. Now, one of the figures from that scandal, Johnny Chung, has now gone public. He's apparently in hiding, concerned that he might wind up dead under Fort Marcy Park or in a small airplane crash. And the story just broke that he made a video of the negotiations with the Clintons to have as his dead man switch, because he feared being assassinated over what he knows. And the story is just now breaking over blacklisted news and the European press. You're not going to see this anywhere in the American corporate media. But apparently in his interview in the British media, he basically confirmed what we've been saying all along. The Chinese government and Chinese businessmen were funneling illegal campaign contributions to Bill Clinton's re-election campaign fund in exchange for Bill Clinton authorizing this sale of sensitive technology to China. It's a confirmation of what we've been saying all along. Now, apparently enough people are getting fed up with the Clintons, it's starting to have a pushback. Apparently down in Arkansas, one of their lawmakers has introduced a bill to strip the Clintons' name from the Arkansas airport that is currently named after them. And, of course, it's going to be stinging and a humiliation and nowhere near what the Clintons deserve for what they've been doing. Now, there's an article over at Your News Wire. Apparently there's an insider at the Department of Homeland Security who was saying that all of this pedophilia that's been happening within our government, this pedophile ring, is being run by the CIA and Mossad in order to get blackmail information on politicians, in order to control them. And inside this article, they made one comment which I wholeheartedly agree with, and that is to stop calling it Pizzagate and use the far more inclusive Pedogate to describe this scandal. And that's a lot more comfortable because that focus on Comet Pizza felt like a setup to open us up to defamation lawsuits. But we can talk about pedophilia within the government in general, and the idea that the CIA and Mossad are behind it is hardly anything new. Getting politicians, getting leaders, getting corporate leaders into compromising situations in order to blackmail them is as old as politics itself. And it's certainly something that Israel has been master of for many, many years. Remember when that whole Monica Lewinsky thing first came on out? And one of the stories that came on out was that Bill Clinton told Monica Lewinsky that their phone sessions had been recorded. And they weren't recorded at the White House end, which had a private, highly secure phone system. Apparently somebody tapped Monica Lewinsky's phone at her home, and they got the recording. And so Bill Clinton was saying, they've got this recording, we don't know what's going to happen, but if anybody comes up with it, just say that we knew we were being recorded and we were just going along for the joke. It's a weak excuse. But at the same time, Bill Clinton ordered the FBI to call off their search for Israel's highest placed spy within the administration, codename Mega. So blackmail definitely is a tool of statecraft. What I really fail to comprehend is how anybody who's in a position of responsibility like that would ever allow themselves to get involved in anything like that, knowing it's an engraved invitation to being blackmailed and controlled. Maybe they're being told that we're not going to allow you into the higher levels of the government unless you do something we can blackmail you with, so we know you're dependable and reliable and will do as you're told. Maybe that's what's behind all of this. Maybe some of these people molesting these children really don't like it. Maybe they find it offensive, but they figure it's something they've got to do if they aspire to higher office, because that's how the iron grip control of the deep state is maintained. Now, we put a link from our website to the White House petition website where they have put up this petition to ban Google's blatant suppression of free speech. And the signatures are already piling on in. They need 100,000 signatures by March 24th, I think it is. And the White House will have to take action. And it basically is responding to Natural News, just basically blanking out, from Google blanking out Natural News from their search databases. Now, everybody is sending in their suggestions for alternative search engines. One that came in today, and I checked it out, DuckDuckGo. And it has an advantage over Yandex because when you do a news search in Yandex, you get a lot of Russian articles, and I don't speak Russian. Or I speak enough Russian to get into a fight at a Russian bar, and that's about it. But DuckDuckGo, I checked it out. I put in vaccine safety issues, and I got a whole string of articles from Natural News right at the top of the page. So stop using Google, start using DuckDuckGo if you don't want to use Yandex. And somebody else send in others. We're going to be going through all of these in the coming weeks. There are places where you can still have uncensored access to what you need to know to make good choices. Now, InfoWars put out a video about censorship. It's being censored. The monetization was removed from it by YouTube. They're not even trying to hide the fact that they're trying to shut down the independent media, trying to starve us of money, starve us of visibility, because they want to go back to this wonderful world where they can lie to you all and you will believe them without question. It's not likely to happen. Even if the independent media vanished overnight, do you think anybody is going to trust the corporate media for the next 50 years? I don't think so. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And an update on this Google versus Natural News story. Google has apparently finally come up with an excuse for why they scrubbed the entire Natural News domain from their servers. And you're going to love this one. Google is claiming that apparently some blog posts in the blogging section of Natural News that were posted back in 2014 contained a suspicious URL that had some ad code running in it that may have been a problem. And none of this was in any of the actual Natural News articles. The script was not even on the Natural News domain. But this third-party script, which was invoking cpxcenter.com, was found on 13 blog posts from back in 2014. And using that as their excuse, Google blacklisted the entire naturalnews.com domain, including all 140,000 plus pages of content that contained no such third-party scripts. That's the equivalent of a police officer pulling you over for a broken taillight and then confiscating the entire car. Now, if Google thinks anybody is going to believe this, they got another thing coming. But right now they're realizing that the stink we in the independent media are kicking up about this is damaging their credibility, because people around the world are all of a sudden saying, we can't trust Google to give us the news that we want. Google is censoring. Google is filtering. Google has joined the corporate media to feed us what is in the corporation's interest. Why should we waste our time there? We're going to go over to Yandex. We're going to go over to DuckDuckGo. So they've come up with this lame excuse to say we were perfectly valid and justified in shutting the entire domain down. If you believe that one, I have some of Saddam's nuclear weapons to sell you. During this next commercial break, I want you all to go over to that link that goes to the White House petition website, and you sign that petition to get the White House involved in this. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Glenn in Philadelphia, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. I'm very concerned about these allegations that Kellyanne Conway is bringing shame upon the legal profession.
Mm-hmm.
If this be true, it might tempt people to hold the legal profession in derision, and people might start making lawyer jokes.
Oh, it's time to bring back the lawyer jokes.
What are they thinking? And you know, if you can't trust, and also if you can't, you just sit there about trusting. If you can't trust Google, Mike, who can you trust? I mean, it's, you know.
Well, I don't trust Google anymore. Of course, I haven't for quite a long time. Same thing with WikiLeaks. You know, and more people are beginning to realize there's some good info on WikiLeaks, but it too has a political agenda. And I remember our little falling out many, many years ago because somebody had created articles for Michael Rivero and WhatReallyHappened.com, and they were not very flattering. In particular, they kept saying anti-Semitic hate site. So I went on in and I said the site is critical of the actions of Israel's government, which is far more accurate. And then the next day it was changed back to anti-Semitic hate site. So I went back in to try and edit it, and I was blocked under the excuse that Michael Rivero is not a recognized authority on the subject of Michael Rivero. And I went public with that. And I'm not kidding. That was their excuse. And I went public with that on my website, and WikiLeaks banished me. You will not find any articles about Michael Rivero or WhatReallyHappened.com on WikiLeaks. I'm website non grata.
I have the solution to that.
Yeah.
The absolute unquestionable authority on Michael Rivero would be Claire.
Yes. You know, I don't need Google. Claire knows everything.
Great. No, I mean, she's unquestionably an authority on Michael Rivero, even though you are not.
Yes, unquestionably. Good point. Very good point.
All right.
All right, well, listen, thank you. We're going to let you go. We're going to take another break for commercials, and if the situation wasn't so serious, it really would be laughable. We're living in the middle of a comedy farce. We'll be right back. And aloha, welcome back to the show. And a quick correction on that last phone call. I meant to say Wikipedia had banned me and declared me persona non grata, not WikiLeaks. And there's so many wikis out there, and it's actually a Hawaiian word. It means fast. All right, here we go. Now then, Le Pen is surging to the lead in the latest polls, and basically she is being perceived in the same light as Donald Trump, a slap in the face to the establishment by the voters, or for the more colorful, giant middle finger. And that's really what's going on here. This rush to create a single global government has created a political climate that could lead to a single global revolution. And it does seem like it's headed that way. Now, apparently, Martin Schulz, leader of Germany's Social Democrats, is gaining on Angela Merkel because he's starting to sound more and more like he's moving away from the hard agenda of the Social Democrats, and he's veering toward populism. In other words, he's not going to play the political machine. He understands right now there's a populist frenzy across the globe, and he's going to hop on board. He knows where his future fortunes are leading. Now, there's something very interesting going on over in Austria. And apparently it's a phenomenon called state deniers. And this is a segment of the population, and it's growing. Austrians, they've declared themselves state deniers who don't accept the legitimacy of the Republic of Austria. They don't recognize the authority of state organs. They refuse to pay taxes. They refuse to pay fines. And basically, their rationale is the government is not responsive to the Austrian people anymore. And that is something people all over Europe and even here in the United States are seeing, where the government seems far more concerned with caring for the illegal aliens and the refugees and the migrants and grabbing more money for themselves and their corporate buddies, and absolutely does not seem to be at all concerned with health and safety and quality of life of the indigenous national population. Now, turning over to the war zones, the Pentagon is getting ready to present a new anti-ISIS plan to President Trump, and on the list is an actual ground invasion by U.S. troops into Syria to battle ISIS. Really, we're only going after ISIS. This is not an invasion to get Assad, even though we've been trying to get him for 5 years. And, of course, this proposal to put U.S. boots on the ground against ISIS is ignoring that small technicality that the U.S. does not have Syria's permission to be in Syria in the first place, as well as having a long history of bombing critical Syrian infrastructure while claiming to be aiming at ISIS. We're bombing ISIS. Oh, sorry about that hospital. We're bombing ISIS. Oh, sorry about that water treatment plant. We're bombing ISIS. Oh, sorry about those food warehouses. Our pilots are just so terrible at this kind of thing. It really is. Now then. As you know, one of the big issues that we're looking at, and again, this is getting zero coverage on the corporate media, was John McCain's trip to Syria to meet with the leaders of the rebels trying to overthrow Bashar al-Assad and to reassure them that despite Donald Trump's order to the CIA to stop all support for all groups fighting against Syria's President Assad, that somehow or other the weapons will continue to get there. Now, this puts McCain in violation of the Logan Act. And is he just that much in love with bloody war? Well, maybe, maybe not. Remember all the way back in Watergate, the advice that Deep Throat gave, follow the money? Well, it turns out Senator McCain's estimated net worth is $21 million. That's a pretty hefty financial empire, which geopolitically needs constant tending. So here is the question. How much of his wealth is invested in the military-industrial complex? And is John McCain, an up-and-coming George Soros, tinkering with world politics primarily to fatten his own wallet? And that is a very legitimate question to ask, and it's one of the reasons why in the blueprint for the New America, all high officials, not just the president, but all members of the legislative body, all top appointed officials, will have to put their personal wealth into a blind trust so that their own financial well-being does not become a factor in how they're behaving. But we do need to take a look at just where John McCain has his wealth invested. And if some of it is invested in defense contractors, weapons makers, then all of a sudden his behavior becomes less and less about protecting the poor innocent civilians of Syria and more about putting more money in his own wallet. Now, as you know, we're coming up on the Oscars, and I don't watch them anymore because they are very, very political, and they seem to get more and more political all the time. Apparently, the Netflix movie, The White Helmets, is up for an Oscar in the short documentary category. And what's interesting is we all know this group is a fraud, and the Netflix movie is basically little more than an infomercial. And awarding this mini documentary, The White Helmets, an Oscar would certainly fit in with the desire of Hollywood to appear supportive of human rights, even though that actually means supporting a propaganda operation to justify another bloody regime change war in the Middle East. Hollywood's caught up in this idea that somehow wars are good, wars are sweet, wars are doing good things, it's a humanitarian war. There is no such thing. Now, the French Foreign Minister, Jean-Marc Ayrault, is attacking Marine Le Pen for her comments in support of Bashar al-Assad, saying we should just leave him alone. But that's not the agenda. The agenda is to get Assad out and get a globalist puppet in. Anyway. Now then, a couple of days ago, China surprised everybody by embargoing coal imports from North Korea. And North Korea's sale of coal to China is a major component of its economy. And the move clearly sent a signal that China is not going to back North Korea in a conflict. But it may have been more serious than that, because now apparently China internally is saying we need to prepare for a possible collapse of the regime in North Korea. I mean, North Korea is hanging by the edge. Kim Jong-un is not well regarded. In fact, he seems to have lost his reality license long ago. He's suspected in the death of his half-brother. And it may be that China just decided to remove the threat of a wide-ranging Pacific war by taking out North Korea themselves, just by cutting off the flow of money. Crashing the government could easily happen. And that would yank the rug out of the U.S. effort to try and get into a war with China by going through North Korea. Now, North Korea, of course, is screaming that China is dancing to the U.S. tune over this sanctioning of the coal, and they're very, very upset about that. Now, getting on back to Kim Jong-un's half-brother, his older brother, it has now come on out that the weapon used to assassinate him was VX nerve gas. And apparently it was sprayed on his face by these assassins who somehow managed to avoid getting it on themselves. And it does take a while to kill in slow doses. But it raises the question, where does North Korea get VX gas? Do they have these chemical weapons? And that's the far larger implication of what they've found. What's really alarming, of course, is that nobody has decontaminated that airport concourse where he was sprayed. All right, let's talk about the economic news here a little bit. Mortgage delinquencies are swinging upward again. We seem to be heading into a repeat of the 2008 mortgage-backed securities fraud meltdown. We've been hearing a lot about house flipping, running up real estate prices, trying to create artificial equity which can then be harvested out as loans to continue lavish lifestyles. Everybody's living on credit and they're borrowing more, but it really isn't working because there is no new wealth coming into the system. Basically, the entire country right now is running like you're given a credit card, you max it out, you're on the last month where if you don't make a payment, you'll be in trouble. You go out and you get another credit card and you transfer the balance. And then you put more on the new credit card. Then you max that one out and you get up to the point where you have to make a payment or you're going to be in trouble. You get a third credit card and so forth and so on. And it looks like you're living a good life, but you're not. You're just getting in deeper and deeper and deeper because there's nothing new coming in. And the economic indicators are very troubling. J.C. Penney is going to close 140 stores. They're offering 6,000 of their long-term employees early retirement. Aeropostale, PacSun, Sears, and Kmart are all showing signs of imminent collapse because nobody has money to go to the store and buy things. For any economy to function, there must be a recycling mechanism that takes the money that has accumulated at the top and bring it back down to the bottom as decent wages and salaries so that people can take that wealth and pump it back into the economy and keep the cycle going. That is the critical flaw under fascism. That recycling mechanism is gone as part of the agenda of locking all the wealth at the extreme, extreme top. Apparently, appliance giant H.H. Gregg is on the verge of bankruptcy. They've had 14 straight quarters of declines. People are hanging on to their appliances, repairing them as long as they possibly can. Nobody wants to spend the money on a new appliance, especially because the new appliances seem more fragile and lower in quality than what you've got now. They look good. They got all the whiz-bang features, but there's a high rate of breakdown, way too much plastic. Now, we're seeing indicators that gold, and for that matter silver, may be about to break out from all these mechanisms that have been holding the prices down. And again, we advise people to preserve part of their wealth in physical silver, physical gold, small amounts so there's no record being kept, under your own control. Do not invest in paper contracts. Those are leveraged hundreds to one. When there's a run on those gold contracts, most people are going to be left just holding that piece of paper, and that will be it. Meanwhile, of course, what we're hearing from Wall Street and the corporate media is gold is a barbarous relic. Really, why do you even want to bother with that? And then on the other hand, you have all these governments and these Wall Street firms are trying to gobble up as much gold as they possibly can. There's a disconnect there. There's a disconnect there. What it is they want your gold. And if they succeed in bringing about a cashless society, they are going to take it from you. Because the cashless society only works if there is no way for you to have your money in a portable store of wealth under your physical control. India used to be one of the largest per capita consumers of gold, mostly in jewelry. That's all been shut down now that India is going cashless society. The jewelry is grandfathered in, but now a lot of the gold investment, it's just being confiscated. Remember, Roosevelt confiscated physical gold from the American people to save the banks back in 1933. So it's not like it hasn't been done before. Now, at this point, household debt in the United States is about to reach its previous record from 2008 sometime this year. We're sinking in deeper and deeper. And of course, to the private central bankers, that's a good thing. The more debt, the more they make from us, the more they can take from us. It's designed that way. Now, along with all the other indicators of economic problems, apparently George Soros has placed a $500 million bet on the U.S. economy failing and corporations becoming bankrupt. In other words, he's taken $500 million and he is short-selling major companies all across the board. He's betting $500 million things are going to go bad. And by the way, that's how Soros has made most of his fortune. He has this incredible knack of short-selling stocks just before something really bad happens to destroy the stock's value. There may be a linkage there, I don't know. But that's how he made his money. And when you consider that George Soros is a guy who openly admits helping the Nazis round up fellow Jews and that he feels no remorse about it at all, then the possibility of a little industrial sabotage to boost his stock portfolio is not completely unreasonable suspicion, is it? Now, apparently the World Trade Organization has their knickers in a twist over the Trump trade agenda, where Donald Trump wants to use import tariffs to try and revive America's self-reliance, internal industry, internal agriculture, and of course the World Trade Organization is fully on board with the globalist agenda. They want the U.S. to have lower import tariffs so that we will continue importing things from other parts of the world even though we have nothing to export back and balance our books. And so there is a real possibility that Donald Trump may pull the United States out of the World Trade Organization. And that could be a hammer blow that would bring the entire thing crashing down. And that's another reason why they're so afraid of Donald Trump. They're so close to having their one world global government. They're so close to having their one world private central bank. They can taste it. And gosh darn that Brexit vote and Donald Trump and now Marine Le Pen and Geert Wilder, they're all just conspiring to bring that whole global dream down. Those bad people. Bad, bad, bad. Now, as you know, Obamacare is a subject of much discussion. GOP lawmakers who are on recess are having town hall meetings in their home districts. They are being hammered by Americans saying, when are you going to repeal Obamacare? We can't deal with this anymore. More about this when we come back from these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And this Google natural news fiasco is falling apart. Apparently somebody did a check, and as I mentioned earlier, Google is justifying shutting off the entire natural news website from their search database because some blog posts from back in 2014 had this little ad script that went to a questionable URL. Somebody just did a search and they found the exact same ad script running on Google's own Blogspot network. So already Google's justification for what they did has just been blown into smithereens here. And let's be very honest. I am sure that if in the Google ad tools, which webmasters have access to, if Google had posted a little automated message, these 13 blog posts contain a questionable URL, I'm sure that Mike Adams would have gone on in and deleted those links. So nobody is going to believe that Google was justified in shutting down the entire natural news network on the basis of this little ad script from 2014 in 13 blog posts on naturalnews.com when the exact same ad script and questionable URL have been found on Google's own Blogspot network. Under the same rules they're claiming for natural news, Google should vanish right now. Somehow, I don't think that's going to happen. Alrighty, so before the commercial break, we were talking about Obamacare and how all these GOP legislators who are on recess from Congress now, they're in their home districts and they're having town hall meetings, and they're getting hammered by people saying, you know, Trump came on in promising to repeal Obamacare. Why are you not supporting him on this? And that Obamacare is just a raw deal for everybody except the health insurance industry and the government itself. And basically, when you look at the high insurance premiums for those Obamacare compliant policies, the sky-high deductibles, which make them virtually useless, it was just a license by the health insurance companies to loot the American people. And the 20 Obamacare tax hikes cumulatively are a $1 trillion with a T dollar net tax increase on the American people. In other words, Obamacare is a mechanism to tax the middle class into being the poor class. Because all tyrannies and dictatorships have to get rid of the middle class because it is from the middle class that opposition to oligarchy arises. That's what happened during the French Revolution. That's what happened during the American Revolution. And all tyrants try and get rid of the middle class. The Soviet Union was designed to never have a middle class, and that's one of the reasons they lasted as long as they did. And they still fell apart. All right, we're going to take a break here for station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, hour number 2. And just got a number here. Regarding the mortgage delinquencies right now, they're approaching 12%. In other words, just a hair more than 1 out of every 10 mortgages in the United States is delinquent. That is a red warning sign. And because of lowering wages and salaries and skyrocketing housing prices, Americans are caught in the middle. And that so-called American dream of owning your own home, not that you ever really did with eminent domain and constant property taxes, but it's another warning sign. The economy is not functioning in a manner that is conducive to the best quality of life for the American people. Now, getting on over to the European problems with immigration, everybody is still making a huge ruckus about Sweden. And Sweden's Justice and Migration Minister is accusing anti-immigration party leaders of lying about Sweden when they wrote in the Wall Street Journal that Donald Trump was right about what's going on over there in Sweden. They're trying to keep a lid on it, and they're out there saying, how dare you? You are lying. You are just being anti-immigrant when you say all these things. But we're seeing with our own eyes the videos of the rioting, the setting of cars on fire in that primarily migrant neighborhood of Stockholm. Apparently, in 2015, there were at least 30 attacks using hand grenades in Malmö. And apparently, there's been yet another instance of Arab men live streaming a sexual assault on Facebook. Yet again. And apparently it's part of a PR campaign by Tunisian men to encourage other Tunisians living in Europe to come to Sweden. Look at the fun we're having. Come on over. We can do this. Nothing happens to us. Okay, let's see. We're going to go ahead and take a phone call. Janet in Kansas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, hello. I've been listening to you for years, but one of the questions I have is you're watching Trump, and he's not backing off of the economic alliances with other countries like Russia, and you see Tillerson kind of there. Is it not possible that with the coming economic crash that we most certainly are going to have, that Trump's strategy here is to bring us in for a soft landing via economic alliances with other countries?
Well, that probably is about the only strategy that he can follow right now is try and make the landing as soft as possible. He can't stop the crash because of the inherent flaws in private central banking, and I think Trump and I think Trump understands the alternative plan of trying to keep the dollar supreme by destroying Russia and China. It cannot be accomplished, and so his only option is try and make the crash as soft as possible.
Yeah, bring us in for a break landing, ba-boom, rather than totally obliterating the entire global economy, and with us being at the center of it. That I think that's possible if we have some trade deals going on here.
We have to have something to trade.
Mutually beneficial.
We have to have something to trade.
That's true.
Yeah, that's our biggest. That's Trump's biggest problem right now. No money to do any work with, and American manufacturing's been in decline. What we're manufacturing today is overpriced junk. Even our weapons systems. It used to be America's defense industry was considered the best in the world. They've lost that. Nobody wants our GMO agriculture. We're in a really serious mess here. because that petrodollar deal, forcing everybody to use the dollar, was the only thing keeping Wall Street and the Federal Reserve propped up.
Sustaining. Mm-hmm.
But, of course, keeping Wall Street and the Federal Reserve propped up does not help Americans deal with the economic realities that are going on around them.
That's true. But something to think about. I mean, especially as you watch Tillerson, you know, who understands this kind of stuff, you know, as Secretary of State.
Okay.
Maybe there's some negotiation. Okay,
well,
just an idea.
Well, I think what we're going to see is when it becomes very obvious that the United States is in economic trouble, you're going to see other countries moving to sever those economic ties as quickly as possible. Because back in 2008, everybody got an object lesson about how economic globalism made everybody a victim to everybody else's mistakes, which is exactly what happened. The mortgage-backed security fraud meltdown on Wall Street almost wrecked the banks in Europe, and I'm sure Europe has not forgotten that lesson. And by now they probably have... Deutsche Bank got into trouble. It really did hammer the whole world. And I would say if there's any reasonable, prudent leadership in these other countries, they're going to have contingency plans drawn up where they're going to say, we're just going to cut the line here. And we're not going to let what happened to you happen to us as well. The big mess that nobody seems able or willing to deal with is that derivatives exposure. That should never have been allowed to happen in the first place. It may take something as draconian as simply declaring them all null and void, which is going to make everybody who bought those derivatives very, very unhappy. They might be entitled to a refund on the purchase price, but these gamblers, they're going to want, if the derivatives activate, they're going to want all their money. We may wind up in a state of hyperinflation.
We may wind up at war.
Well, that's a real possibility right now that I would like to avoid. But we may see a global hyperinflation that'll have us in Zimbabwe territory just to have the numbers to clear up all of these derivatives. You have a derivative on this bank and you're owed $2 billion. Okay, here's $2 billion. And you go to leave the building, and as you go out the parking gate, they'll say, well, that was $120 million for 30 minutes parking. And that could easily happen.
Well, it's just an idea. Maybe there's some option there other than, I think it's war. If we get into an absolute precipitous crash, That's what I think is going to happen.
I think if the crash happens, a war after the crash is not going to really produce any positive results from the United States. That's why they were trying to get into the war before the crash. But I think they're out of time.
Yeah.
Okay?
Well, anyway, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to switch over to Kyle in Pennsylvania. Aloha, Kyle. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. This business with Google and natural news is the exact same pattern as the mainstream media with Milo. And I've been thinking about it. It's really the same exact pattern that all predators have, where they want to try to separate one of the, gazelle, impalas, whatever, from the herd and attack, take them down.
Well, surprise, surprise, we gazelles are organized.
That's the whole thing. I can't reiterate enough to everybody, an assault on natural news is an assault on my assault on all of us.
Okay, you've got a very, very noisy phone connection. I can't understand you. I'm going to have to let you go here, but I'm going to let you go with a comment that Ben Franklin made upon the signing of the Declaration of Independence, and he said, "Gentlemen, we're all going to have to hang together, or most assuredly we will hang separately." And that's exactly where we are right now. We in the independent media have to unite and look after each other, put aside our own personal petty differences, and we have to unite together because we're facing a common threat from the corporate media and from various governments' interests. So thank you very much. We're going to let you go. We're going to take a second to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And we're going to take another phone call from Philip in Virginia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, aloha, Mike. Just a couple of things with regards to the recent developments with Google and natural news. That is the beginning of the onslaught, I guess. We got over at Food Babe. They're doing the same thing to her. And when I heard you go into the rationale of why Google was doing that, I knew in my gut that it was a lie. Mm-hmm. It's just, these people, they know no shame. But anyway, and one other thing, I want to reprise something, one of your ideas some time ago about some of the things that the president needs to tackle right away, and that's election reform. It seems like you and Robert Steele are on the same page. He was talking about that. That is the number one priority. And there was something I was going to mention about that. But anyway, this election reform is definitely something that needs to be addressed immediately. And, yes. I was going somewhere with that. But anyway, I know what it was. Yeah, you said the salute, or one of the things you'd like to see done, you might remember talking about this, about people petitioning the FCC. I'm not for licensure. I think it's part of the problem with this country. They get a license to take a wife. Come on, people, or to travel up and down the highway. But anyway, you mentioned that people need to petition the FCC to get these the fake stream media's licenses revoked because they're causing damage to the. It's demonstrable, the damage. Like Pete Cook said of Google the other day. He didn't mean it in this sense, but he said that fake news is destroying people's minds.
Well, yeah, petitioning the FCC is not going to have much of an effect under the current political regime. And in any event, the networks like CNN and so forth are not really considered broadcasters. The licenses are at the transmitters, the local TV stations. And every time their license is up for renewal, and you can find when your local TV station's license is up for renewal, at the FCC website, they are required to hold hearings in order to get testimony that they are serving the public interest. And that would be their weakest point, because you can go on in there and say you're not serving the public interest when you lie to us about Saddam's nuclear weapons, when you're lying to us about the jobless numbers and so forth. And these TV stations are required by law to submit the negative comments with their application for license renewal. Well, probably they'll get their licenses renewed anyway, because their real job is to try and control what Americans are thinking. And that was admitted to on the air on MSNBC. But at least the FCC is going to understand how badly all of these TV stations and corporate media are failing to do that. And I think they're really waking up to that right now.
I wonder if the same...
Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. I was wondering if the same rule applies to radio stations and newspapers as well, because it was, like you just mentioned yesterday, admitted, should have been headline news, but it wasn't. Mika Brzezinski's comment that their job is to control how people think. Come on, people.
Radio stations are required to have licenses, and yes, when their licenses are renewed, there's a public comment window there. There is no license required to have a newspaper. Anybody can set up a newspaper and start publishing, just like anybody can set up a website. We're not required to have a license to run a website, at least at this point.
Boy, it sure would be some poetic justice for people, these local news stations and conglomerates that demonize the independent media and those that are getting it right. If they lost a license or two, boy, that would be really sweet. But anyways, okay, Mike, thanks for laying that out.
All right, I will. Thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. The reality is right now that TV broadcasters are in serious trouble. Radio broadcasters are in trouble. In fact, there was a radio station I had on a button in my car just vanished off the dial 2 weeks ago. Just went out of business, couldn't do anything anymore. And we're at the point right now where these large corporate media outlets have been caught literally using fraud to artificially inflate their audience, from which we can infer their real audience just isn't there anymore. And at this point, why is anybody bothering to watch CNN or MSNBC. It's a waste of time. And just like, why are you still using Google when you know that it is acting as a filter so that you only see what Google thinks you ought to be allowed to see, as opposed to going over to DuckDuckGo or Yandex or any of these other search engines which are coming online, and looking at these new social media companies that have just started up and how quickly they have grabbed a significant share of the market. We could very rapidly see some of these companies start to go out of business. Now, I'm sure the ones that are towing the government line and working for the elites are going to be propped up, but only so long as they can convince their masters, the people with the checkbooks, that they're still able to somehow control the minds of America. Believe me, when the people who are writing the checks at MSNBC realize that they're not controlling the minds of America, those people are all going to be fired. It's just a numbers game. We have to stop watching them. We have to stop watching them, because even if we're watching these TV channels to scream at them, "You liar, I'm not going to listen to you anymore," your little cable box is still recording that you're tuned into CNN or whatever, and they use those numbers to say, this is our audience and these are our ad rates. Turn them off. They showed that wonderful movie Network was on TV a few days ago, and where Howard Beale is doing one of his rants, and he's saying, you've got to turn off that TV. It's not reality. And it's amazing how prescient Patty Chayefsky was in that screenplay. And it's like I said the other day, I have this lady who writes in every day about what's on The View and how liberal they are and they don't make sense and everything. I wrote back, why are you wasting your time? Don't you have anything better to do? Find something to do with that same time that's more productive. Just turn it off. If you're not getting the truth from these corporate media outlets anyway, turn them off. And if the White House is going to make this ban on these liberal media outlets permanent, then there really is no point in watching what they have to say anyway. You can find the news that interests you on the Internet using the new search engines that aren't filtering. So stop using Google. Go to DuckDuckGo. Go to Yandex. Okay. All righty. We're going to take one more phone call here. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing, Mike? Mike, I don't know. I'm pretty sure you know, but I don't know if everybody knows that this Mika Brzezinski is the daughter of the arch globalist New World Order.
Zbigniew Brzezinski.
Friend of Zigamu. Okay.
Well, I mean, that explains how she got the job, because frankly, I'm not impressed with her otherwise.
No, she doesn't even look very good. She's at least some of these Fox women are hot. She's not even that,
Yep.
So, I mean, but she's just as dumb as the rest of them are, though. By the way, who's a really good reporter, by the way? She's not only hot, but she's got a brain. Is Maria, I can't pronounce her name right now. She's on RT.
Yes, I know who you're talking about, yes.
The world.
Yeah. Now, you realize that as a married man, the hotness of the news babes is not a factor for me. But I am definitely interested in their brains and whether they're really being objective or if they're pushing an agenda. And as Mika basically telegraphed to us all, yes, corporate media is their business. What they're paid the millions of dollars to do is push an agenda onto us all. They're not paid millions of dollars to tell you the truth. You can get the truth for free.
Fukushima, that's her name. Fukushima. Almost sounds like Fukushima. She's on. She's RT. Excellent reporter. She goes all around the world. She goes to the real heavy-duty trouble spot. Goes right in there. I tell you the truth. I don't think she has any kind of security either. I mean, the woman has not only brains, but she's got guts also. She's in the heart of Syria right now, reporting what's really going on with the Syrian army. Are the good guys? How happy the people are that they're being liberated from the terrorists.
I'm going to have to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back after these few words with another phone call. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, and we're going to take a phone call from Joe in California. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I have a question about most TV news shows nowadays have gone to what I call a distracting background image, a window or something like Fox has their TV program that has people walking past or traffic in kind of a window. RT TV has gone to birds flying in the background. It's out of place for the program, and it's distracting for some reason. I wondered if you knew why.
Maybe that's the reason, so that you're watching the background picture and not paying that close attention to what they're saying, so that only the major parts stick in. And because remember, when the corporate media says something that's not true, they open up a legal risk. And so very often they'll and you see this in the newspapers and magazines all the time. There'll be an inflammatory headline, and then down at the bottom they'll say this has not been confirmed, or they'll basically pull back and say this is coming from third sources, so that they can't be sued. And the same thing is going on very often in the broadcast media as well. So they may think it's pretty and artistic, but you're right, it's got nothing to do with the news. You'd be amazed what those news sets cost, because it's an industry in and of itself of designing these newsroom sets, and they are very efficient uses of the space, and they're very, very expensive. It's a big part of the budget, and they're designed to impress and awe and showcase what's going on. But you're right; those background images almost seemed that they're trying to pull your attention away from what's actually being said or discussed. Or maybe they don't want you looking at the lower crawl.
Could they be used as a form of subliminal messaging?
No. Subliminal messaging never really worked. It was an idea that ad agencies came up with as another service they could sell their big clients, but it was never actually proven to work. But for us out here in the real world, it was kind of fun, looking at the booze ads to see the refraction in the ice cube of the naked girl and so forth and so on. But it didn't really have any impact on actual sales.
Yeah, I was just concerned because over the past months, all of the news programs, I guess you call it, have gone to that type of background where before they did not have it. So I just wanted to let you know about it and see what your thoughts were.
Well,
thanks, Mike.
They're all saying the same news, so I guess they're all starting to look the same. Somebody probably figured, well, if CNN is doing it, we got to do it. Corporate media see, corporate media do.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. Now, speaking of Sweden, and by the way, Grand Tour, the original presenters of Top Gear, had that new show on Amazon Live. The season is over, sadly. And they did a segment in Sweden, and they had some very impolite things to say about Sweden's very liberal government. And I think illustrating this is there is a Swedish municipality that is now considering a regulation that paid workers will be allowed 1 hour per week on the job to have sex. And this is the brainchild of Per-Erik Muskos, who's a counselor in the Swedish district of Övertorneå. And basically, Sweden is trying to have a population boom, in part because their gross domestic product depends on it, and because of the open border policy, they're facing a demographic crisis where native Swedes are going to become a minority in their own country. And the idea of just shutting those borders is apparently verboten. And so now we have this counselor out there saying, well, we should let people on the job have sex 1 hour a week on the job. That's the idea they came up with. I mean, it is absurd. But it's going to get even more bizarre out there in the Church of Liberalology before the end of the show. We'll be right back after these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about immigration, and it is getting ugly out there. Apparently, some Syrian men in their 20s, posing as teenagers, enrolled in a high school in Canada, and sexually assaulted a 14-year-old girl. Canada is turning into the new Sweden with this nonsense, this open borders nonsense. Now, the globalists want all of Earth to be exactly the same everywhere you go, so there's no reason for you to want to travel anywhere else. And look at what it's turning into. The lowest common denominator of every nation is how we're all supposed to be expected to agree to live. Now, apparently, down in Kansas, there was an illegal immigrant, Thomas Martinez Maldonado, and apparently he was on this Greyhound bus. He raped a 12-year-old girl. And apparently this guy has been deported 19 times. And they just keep letting him back on in, and now this 12-year-old girl has paid the price for it. Now, over in Russia, they do things differently. And I'm going to preface this with that other story about this girl who was assaulted, and I think it was back up in Sweden, and they were all saying, well, look at it from his point of view. You know, he was in need. You should be more sympathetic and just, you know, let any guy use you who wants to because, you know, they have a need. Look at it from his point of view. Russia does it a little bit differently. Apparently there was an incident where some refugees there molested a Russian woman, and some Russian men grabbed him, took him outside, beat him into a pulp, called the police. The police came over, beat him out a little bit more, and then threw him in jail. I have a feeling you're not going to see the problem with women being sexually assaulted in Russia by migrants that you are seeing in Europe and Canada and the United States of America. Hungary is starting to build a second border fence to try and stem the migrant flow into their country. Let's take a phone call. Ron in Texas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I just want to give you a heads up on the video transmission of your broadcast through Bambuster. If I'm using the newest version of Firefox for the past 2 months, the screen displays all network connection attempts failed. I have sent you an email with a screenshot of both that and the one with the web browser that I found that will broadcast your show to me called Lunascape 6. It's a great alternative browser for people that are looking for something that will show websites that some of the web browsers will not show.
Well,
that's all I had to offer to you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I did see your email, and I replied to it. I didn't realize that the point you were trying to make was that my BAM user video is not visible in specific browsers like Firefox, and I'm wondering just why Firefox does not like BAM user. Is it just my show that Firefox is blocking, or it's just anything from BAM user at all?
I couldn't tell you because I don't watch any other shows, particularly other than yours.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for that compliment here. I'll look into this situation. I do know that BAM user, along with my web server, does come under attack to again, try and keep people from logging in and accessing it. I do pay.
This has been going on for, like I said, 2 months now, so it's not intermittent.
All right. Well, thank you very much for letting me know. And I use Chrome, and I don't seem to have a problem seeing my own video with that. I'll check it out with Firefox and see if it's working. It's a little hard for me to check the BAM user video because I'm doing the show at the same time. But thank you for letting me know. I will look into that. I will look into that.
Also, and I wish you would also look into the Lunascape browser. It runs on all 3 engines. It's a very good one.
All right. I'll definitely take a look at that. I'm looking into alternative browsers, alternative social media, alternative search engines these days because the old established names simply cannot be trusted any longer.
Yeah, Lunascape's open source, too, so that helps.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. All right.
Well, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much here. And let's see. We're going to let you go. Now, the state of Washington has declared itself the first sanctuary state. The governor orders state law enforcement to ignore immigration requests from Immigration and Customs Enforcement. This puts the governor in violation of Title VIII. Harboring and encouraging and supporting illegal immigrants is a jailable offense under federal law. And I have to admit I'm a little alarmed that Donald Trump is facing such opposition from people who are openly violating the law. The obvious solution is he should be sending out the federal authorities to start arresting some of these people and throwing them in jail, and the problem is going to go away. But Trump is still trying to solve all the problems the way a businessman would. And I think he's oblivious to some of the other options he has as President of the United States of America. But he's got to get his house in order, and he's got to get control, because right now we have a government that is so badly factionalized and at war with itself, it's dysfunctional. Now, there was a story over at Investment Watch blog, and apparently a former Immigration Customs Enforcement special agent has gone public as to what was really going on under the Obama administration with illegal immigrants. And he starts out by pointing out that there was a law passed in 1965 that empowers ICE agents to serve anyone deemed removable a notice to appear. But apparently the law was considered irrelevant under the Obama administration. The law was on the books, but Obama passed executive orders to slow it down. And this guy is saying you could go on out and arrest an illegal alien under your authority, but the supervisors would just give them heck for it. And so everybody in ICE that was worried about their jobs and promotion and raises and pensions, they just went along and said, all right, we're not supposed to arrest the illegal aliens. And he said everything was being stalled in terms of enforcement on direct orders from the White House under Barack Obama. And the criminal activity just continued on and was not prosecuted. They knowingly allowed illegal immigrant criminals to prey on the American people with impunity. Now, we're still talking about Churkin and the strange circumstances of his death. The first autopsy has not found an obvious cause of death. They're now running toxicological studies to see if he was poisoned. We know there's a lot of work going on right now around the world. VX nerve gas into Kim Jong-un's half-brother, that kind of thing. And so there's this article over at Washington's blog pointing out there's actually been 5 top Russian diplomats die in the last 3 months, plus Putin's chauffeur died in that freak car wreck. There was that plane crash that killed the Russian Army choir, and pointing out that former CIA acting director Mike Morell told Charlie Rose he was going to assassinate Russians to make them pay a price. Now, that is a very, very dangerous precedent you set when you go after another nation's diplomats, who are supposed to be off limits, because it opens the door to high-level assassinations coming back the other way. If the U.S. is behind these assassinations, and I'm not convinced that they are, because of the way Ukraine reacted when the United Nations Security Council wanted to have a resolution about Churkin's death. But if the U.S. is behind these assassinations, it's a very dangerous and reckless thing to do. It's not going to cause Putin to back on down. And it does open the door for reprisals. Now then, apparently, confirming the suspicions of Republican Chair of the House Committee on Oversight, Jason Chavitz's comments last week, Free Beacon reports that a group founded by a former Hillary Clinton campaign staffer is behind this town hall project, where they're going on out and protesting at these town hall meetings against Trump and pushing the liberal agenda. And apparently it's very well funded, and its parent company is located at the same address as another organization funded by George Soros. And Chavez said these town hall protests are not spontaneous organic events. They're carefully orchestrated presentations. Protesters were being bussed in from afar. Exactly the same thing we saw in the riots after the election. They were not genuine grassroots protests. They're organized theater presentations. It's a pageant. We're having a pageant. This might be a good time for you all to go back and review the movie Wag the Dog, which is a great movie anyway. But it's how these things get done. Now, Arizona is considering a law, Senate Bill 1142, and it's expanding the state's racketeering laws. And what they want to be able to do is seize the assets of protesters. And because of a very sloppily written headline, a lot of people are saying this is an attack on freedom of speech of ordinary protesters. And no, it isn't, because what the law is about is seizing the assets of those who pay money to organize protests that turn destructive. And that makes it a very, very different thing instead. Because we know so many of these protests are manufactured events. We know that they are given instructions to become violent, to make whatever point they're trying to make. And there has to be a pushback. Now, the people who organize these manufactured protests and are signing the checks, they don't care if the actual protesters in the streets get arrested and locked up. There's always more useful idiots for them to use. This law in Arizona is aimed at getting to those higher-up organizers who are trying to cause social disruption and instability. And so far are doing so with impunity. Now let's talk about political correctness, because it's starting to really get out there in la-la land. Apparently, a student activist group at the University of Michigan is demanding campus officials provide them with a permanently designated space on central campus for a whites-free zone. I am not kidding you. They want this whites-free zone so that black students can get together to organize and do social justice work. All of these decades, century, of the black community trying to end segregation, and all of a sudden they want to bring it back. You do not cure racism by being racist in reverse. And besides which, if you have a no-whites zone to do your social justice work, who are you talking to? By default, everybody inside that zone is already on board with your agenda. You're preaching to the choir. I mean, that's absurd. Now, over in Massachusetts, the police had a program going on in the schools called High Five Fridays. And basically, it was a program where officers went into elementary schools one day a week simply to say hi and greet the students, high-five the students, as a way of trying to build support within the community. We're not bad people. We're just like you, except we got a uniform on, and, you know, we're goofy little people like you. And as a community outreach, I can see that it has some merit to offset some of the negative publicity that the troublemakers within the police department have been causing. And mind you, this is at the grammar school level. Okay? But apparently, this program has now been canceled out of concern that it's making the illegal immigrants uncomfortable. That and it might make the police, or rather the parents, upset to see police officers on the campus. It's a negative image to see uniformed officers on the school. I mean, that's kind of ridiculous here. Let's see. Top academic calls for sex offender-style hate crime register to restrict access to jobs. Now, the problem is, hate crime is a very, very fuzzy label. And certainly in the context of Israel, Every time you criticize the actions of Israel's government, they declare it a hate crime. And now what they want is a system where if you criticize Israel, they can destroy your employment opportunities. Talk about a death blow to the First Amendment. If you want a job, you will just agree with everything we tell you. If you want to work, you will believe what we tell you to believe. We're good, they're bad. That's all you need to know. Stop thinking, stop asking questions, stay away from that independent media. It's filled with haters. And here's a story, and this is from Natural News. This whole trans thing has gone off the edge of a cliff. With all these guys who say, I identify as a girl, and girls who say, I identify as a guy, and Obama let us use the other restrooms, and Donald Trump's taken that away. Apparently now there's a woman who claims she's actually a cat. So now we're into this trans species. I identify as a cat. All right, there's your box of litter. Have fun. Me, I self-identify as a very wealthy talk show radio host. And if you're not sending me money, then you're committing a microaggression against me and Claire. So shame on you. Just shame on you for that. All of that. The liberals are really living in a fantasy land. They really are. They've constructed this alternative reality, including a website that says Hillary won the election. I'm not sure if they're just neurotic or if they've taken that brief step across the line into outright psychosis at this point. Get that lady a flea collar. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Sorry about that loud noise. I didn't realize my volume was up there. I'm getting a lot of emails from people saying that they are not having any problems seeing the BAM user feed on Firefox. And one of the listeners wrote on in saying that you need to make sure your Adobe Flash is up to date. Otherwise, Firefox will block older versions if you're out of date. And yeah, this constant updating and patching and which version is really kind of complex. And I wish Flash wasn't such a ubiquitous platform because it does have serious security problems. I know in Chrome has an internal Flash player. And if you accidentally add the external one, it can lead to all kinds of problems as well. We need to simplify all these things. We need to get away from this complexity for the sake of complexity that is just making us spend more and more of our time working on our tools rather than working with our tools. It's a huge cost in terms of loss of productivity. All right, getting on back to some stories here. Coming out of governmentslaves.info, there's an article about Snopes. Now, Snopes is a website that apparently is funded by one of Soros's many organizations. And they set themselves up to be the arbiter between what is real and fake on the Internet. And this goes way back before the whole fake news became an issue at all. Unfortunately, over the years, Snopes has been outed for very often presenting the government corporate line and discounting alternative information. So they're another form of gatekeeper. So this article out of governmentslaves.info is headlined, Bombshell Evidence Proves Snopes Being Influenced by Monsanto. And it's saying that the big players in the GMO and agrochemical industry, Monsanto, Bayer, Dow, Syngenta, DuPont, are engaging in an extensive public relations, advertising, lobbying, and political campaigning to make sure that GMOs and the chemical pesticides they require continue to proliferate in the United States. I guess they've realized the rest of the world is on to them. They just got to convince you that it's okay so they can go on to make money. And apparently trying to improve their public image, they're attempting to manipulate everything we see and hear about GMO crops and pesticides in the media and on TV. And they're using these propaganda-laden commercials, mommy blogger articles, farmer endorsements, hired operatives that change Wikipedia and front group websites. And so they go on to say they have evidence that Snopes is being manipulated by Monsanto. We know that this has always been an issue with Wikipedia. where during this run-up to the human-caused global warming, people were going on in and editing the Wikipedia articles on the Roman and medieval warming periods to make it look like it wasn't any real big deal compared to what we're dealing with now. And the actual reality is the Roman and medieval warming periods were much warmer than the world is today, and they did just fine. Got to take a break for station identification. Back with hour number 3 after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Go ahead and give us a call. And getting into some other news here. Up in New Hampshire, the Live Free or Die state, they have just become the 12th state to allow constitutional carry of weapons. And this is a growing trend. And, of course, the liberal gun grabbers are out there saying, oh, it's going to lead to anarchy. It's going to lead to people not liking the government. Well, not liking the government is our right under the First Amendment. But if you look at the inability of the government to protect ordinary people, it certainly makes sense that the Second Amendment grants to us a right of basic self-defense. The average wait time for the police to show up on a 911 call is running about 18 minutes across the U.S. It's not quite that bad here in Hawaii. But, yeah, you're on your own. What are you going to do? Somebody's in your house trying to rob you or rape you, and you're going to say, it's going to be 18 minutes before the cops get here. Would you like some coffee? It's really not going to play. Common sense says that we, the American people, should be allowed to have the exact same weapons, or better, than the street criminals do. And under the Supreme Court's Miller decision, we're allowed to have the same weapons as the uniformed military in order to fulfill the Second Amendment's prime function of holding an abusive government at bay, to keep the states free, which they've already lost that freedom, but that's what that Second Amendment was there for. So good for New Hampshire. Makes me proud to have grown up there. Now then, let's get on out to California and all the rain. They finally have officially declared their drought is over with all the rain that they're getting. They're still trying to find somebody or something to blame it on. Human-caused global warming, the power plant in Hawaii, and all the rest of that. And while we were all watching Oroville, it turned out to be San Jose that was the disaster area. Coyote Creek overflowed, and as a result, 50,000 people had to evacuate following the worst floods in the last 100 years, and the mayor has been forced to admit that they really did not have a flood evacuation plan ready to go. Just like in Oroville when they called the evacuation there when they thought the dam might collapse. And they really didn't have a plan. They just said to everybody, get out. The highway's gridlocked, and everybody was stuck there. And all they really had was the choice between drowning in their home and drowning in their cars if that dam had actually let go. Now, at this point, the Oroville Dam is still being repaired. Everybody's looking at it. Everybody's looking for somebody to blame for the fact that the dam failed in the first place on that spillway. And all the politicians are now up there touring, getting their photo ops and saying, we're working on the problem. But it almost reminds me of that commercial we have on TV where the bank is being robbed and there's a security guy there and they're saying, aren't you going to do something? He says, no, I'm a security monitor, not a security guard. I only tell you if you're being robbed. And he says, yeah, you're being robbed. And the whole point of maintaining quality of life, health and safety is that you are proactive in identifying problems and dealing with them. And remember, in the European press, they've pointed out that concrete spillway at the Oroville Dam was known to have cracked back in 2009. And it was never dealt with. They just painted over the cracks with a concrete solution, and the water continued to come down the spillway. And in all probability, what happened is that it leaked through those cracks, and it hollowed out a void underneath the concrete spillway. And when the void got big enough, the concrete spillway failed. And if you look at those photos of that first failure, there's very obviously a large hole in the ground underneath where it fell apart. So they're going to have a long, hard job repairing that dam and convincing everybody that it is still safe. They don't even know when it's going to be reopened as a tourist attraction, because it has been, being one of the largest dams in the United States. Tourists go up there and see it. It's a monumental work of engineering. But it's now closed and off limits because they're not sure about it. There's even talk about they're going to reopen it for tourism so people can see the repair work going on. Right now the situation is the water level at the Oroville Dam is about 50 feet below the top of the dam itself, which is good. Unfortunately, upstream in the watershed, 9 other holding ponds and dams are absolutely top full. And the water from the recent storms is still percolating down the watershed. So it's looking good. It's looking positive and hopeful. We're not quite out of the woods on this one just yet. We're going to take a moment here to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. So the real problem from the rains was down in San Jose and a lot of other areas that were seriously flooded. And a big part of the problem is, just as was the case over on the eastern seaboard during Hurricane Sandy, a big part of the problem is regular maintenance wasn't being carried out because of the lack of funds. We've been living effectively in a wartime economy ever since 2003. All the money's being spent on war. All the money's being spent on weapons given to other countries like Israel. And not to mention the illegal immigrants and the refugees. And so they're cutting corners. Maintenance wasn't being done. And certainly the case over in Hurricane Sandy, they weren't cutting the tree limbs back from the power lines, which they're supposed to do on a regular basis. So when the winds came in and the tree limbs came down, they took the power lines down with them. The storm drains that are supposed to take the water and channel it out to some place where it's harmless, like the ocean, were actually full of all kinds of debris that backed the water up. And we're finding out the same thing was happening all over California. They weren't taking care of what they've already got. Now, apparently, they had a pretty sizable pair of earthquakes near Seattle, Washington, and exercising caution up there, they've opened the floodgates on the Shasta Dam. This is the first time in 19 years. They're going to draw down the water level there just in case there's going to be another larger quake. There's been a lot of concern over the stresses built up on that Cascadia fault over the years. I remember when Claire and I left Southern California and we moved to Washington State. One of those weird things. When we got there, we got settled in to our new home. And just joking, we said, well, we don't have to worry about earthquakes anymore. And we actually got hit by one about 2 weeks after we arrived. Was the biggest quake they'd had in like 20 years. So they followed us. They followed us up from Southern California. Now, on a more serious note here, and this following story impacts issues such as vaccine safety, GMO safety, human-caused global warming. And the story is coming out of Government Slaves, and it's talking about the National Science Foundation. And they fund various research projects to the tune of $7 billion every single year. And apparently, according to the Daily Caller News Foundation investigative group, a significant amount of that money is spent on outright fraudulent projects where the scientists are faking the data to come up with a desired result. So they went on over to the National Science Foundation and said, do you have any mechanism for actually validating the results of these $7 billion in projects every single year? And the officials at the National Science Foundation said they don't look. They're not estimating. In fact, the direct quote was, "We don't generally speculate about how much misconduct is undetected," according to spokesman Bobby Mixon. Even so, the Inspector General for the National Science Foundation has had 74 investigations over the last 2 years that caught researchers plagiarizing, manipulating data, stealing, wasting government money, or other frauds. And what this does is tell us that any research project that is funded by the government is automatically suspect. Now, those 74 cases are the ones they caught. They're not actively looking to check on the others. And we know that NOAA is currently under fire for indications that they concocted a totally fake report ahead of the Paris Climate Conference, saying global warming hadn't paused, it was still broiling hot out there, even as we're going through yet another severe winter. And as I pointed out the other day, the latest propaganda is really getting absurd. You know, there'll be snow, and then there'll be a brief period without snow, and they'll say, oh, the temperature went up to record high levels, and then it snows again. Like we're really going to believe that the temperature in our communities is going from below freezing to broiling hot to below freezing instantaneously. That's the new way they're trying to reconcile snow and ice on the ground with this agenda that humans are warming the earth and you must pay a carbon tax and submit to a global environmental authority who will tell you how to live your life to preserve Mother Earth. Or more accurately, to preserve as much of Mother Earth for the rich and powerful as they can get away with. But this expose that the National Science Foundation isn't keeping watch on these scientists to make sure they're doing accurate work makes it sound like the National Science Foundation is as much propaganda as it is actual research. What's going on here is very, very simple. In ancient times, rulers would use the clergy to convince the population to go along with something. The gods say you must do this. Trust me, I speak for the gods. Well, religion is kind of on the wane. People don't automatically just do whatever a nearby priest tells them to do. We're a much more enlightened people. So, rulers have co-opted science to be the new clergy. Believe what I say because I speak for science. And don't you dare conduct your own experiments and demand reproducibility, or you'll be a heretic. The white laboratory coat has replaced the priestly robes, but the mechanism is still the same. I want you to do this, and I have this authority figure saying this is what you should do. And if you look at some of the stuff that came out of the human-caused global warming hoax, ClimateGate, it's obviously not science. A good example of that would be what happened at the Hadley Climate Research Unit at the University of East Anglia, where they were at the forefront of saying our data is showing the world is warming, the world is warming, the world is warming. And other climate scientists said, we'd like to look at your raw data and your methodology in order to reproduce your results, because reproducibility of results is the foundation of the scientific method. I should be able to take the same data or the same materials, conduct the same experiment or the same analysis, and come up with the exact same results that you did. And the Hadley Climate Research Unit said, well, we threw the raw data away. We just didn't have enough room on our computers. You know how expensive hard drives are. Just take our word for it. After all, we're scientists. And that was the first giveaway that something crooked was going on. Of course, another area where this exposure of fraud within the National Science Foundation programs is going to have an impact is on vaccines. And there's an article out here at GizaDeathStar.com on how this recent Yale paper is something that the big pharmaceutical corporations can't ignore. This is, after all, Yale University. And the vaccine companies are already mounting a huge public relations advertising campaign to try and negate potential damage coming out of the vaccine safety panel that President Trump is setting up under the leadership of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is a well-known, well-respected critic of vaccines and vaccine safety. And what's really kind of interesting in this article is the author is talking about a personal experience with a friend who got a shot of flu vaccine, the one and only vaccination ever received in his life, and put him in the hospital ICU in a respirator and in a coma. As we pointed out last week, there are more than 50 peer-reviewed, reproducible studies indicating exposure to vaccines causes neurological damage. And in this article on the Giza Death Star, they're saying it almost seems like it's intentional, because in many cases, vaccines for animals, veterinary vaccines, seem to be cleaner and safer than those approved for human beings. Now, there's a YouTube video we link to on the front page of WhatReallyHappened.com, and it's made by a former sales representative for one of the big pharmaceutical corporations, Gwen Olson. And she resigned her job when she began to realize the harm the products she had been selling were causing. And she came on out with this video in which she stated something that a lot of people have been thinking for a very long time. The pharmaceutical industry does not want to cure you. Big Pharmaceuticals' agenda is to keep you all chronically ill and sell you constant ongoing treatments for the symptoms their medications have given you. They want permanent customers. And I've commented on this before. Despite all the talk about, send in donations, we're seeking a cure for cancer, we're seeking a cure for AIDS, we're seeking a cure for whatever it is, the disease of the week. Nobody is really seeking a cure. Cures are bad business. If I'm a doctor and you are ill and you come into my office and I cure you, you go away. That's the end of the revenue stream. If you are ill and you come into my office and I treat your symptoms to make you feel better, but you still have the illness, then you're coming back to me month after month after month after month for more treatments of the symptoms. And there's a guaranteed revenue stream. Are corporate CEOs that heartless and ruthless? Yeah, we've seen it before. We've seen it with the disregard for public safety in the fracking industry, the disregard for the potential damage to the biosphere in the GMO industry, the extreme recklessness in the fracking and nuclear industries. To those leaders at the top of these large corporations, ordinary people are just revenue sources. We're livestock. We're human capital to be harvested from by any means necessary and possible. And we need to understand that and stop believing that these people are somehow superior moral beings just because they're portrayed that way on film and TVs. Remember that doctor got sent to prison for 45 years because he'd been telling perfectly healthy people they had cancer in order to sell them chemotherapy and radiation treatments. That lust for those pieces of paper and ink have destroyed our moral compass, and we need to get it back. All right, we're coming up here on a commercial break. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Do give us a call, and we'll be back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're talking about ruthless exploitation of the masses by corporations. And I think probably you'd have to have Microsoft up on that list with the way they were trying to force Windows 10 on everybody, because Windows 10 is the gateway to Windows as a service. No more perpetual licenses. You will pay for your software over and over and over again, month after month after month, which removes any incentive to improve the product in the future. Because the revenue stream is going to continue. We can kick on back and just have a big party here. Now, apparently Cloudflare had a bug that leaked sensitive data from customers' websites, including passwords, cookies, and authentication tokens. And apparently this is a big problem. Cloudflare is supposed to be offering enhanced security and performance for more than 5 million websites. I'd actually looked at them briefly to deal with the constant attacks on my website, but there was a compatibility issue and we never moved forward on that. But obviously those who want unfettered access to your private data do not like companies like Cloudflare, and so it's not surprising that they were attacked and hacked into. Now, sometimes people can just be kind of dumb about their computers. There's a story where apparently there was a security lapse that exposed the New York airport's critical servers for an entire year. And the files that were stolen by the hackers included gigabytes of emails, sensitive government files, and a password list, which researchers say could have given hackers full access to the airport systems, meaning the air traffic control system. Go on in and start playing games there. Now, we're going to see the computer security companies coming on out and say, well, we'll secure your systems for so many thousands of dollars. And it's big. Computer security is big business. And that may be a big reason why nobody's doing anything about the cyber criminals and the hackers and the ransomware writers. Because it stimulates the economy. You're forced to spend money on computer security stuff. And that's good for the economy. It's called the broken window analogy. Somebody breaks your window, you're forced to buy a new window. That's good for the economy because it's good for the window salesman and installer. But the analogy is false, especially in an economy already under stress, because very often the person is being forced to spend money on the new window that was being planned to be spent on something else, like capital improvements to the business or hiring a new person. The broken window analogy only works when everybody has a surplus of wealth, and that is certainly not the case for the 99% right now. And in addition to the cost of all this computer security, there is the time lost dealing with hack attacks, installing the security, maintaining it. It's a huge loss of productivity at a time where our economy cannot support that. We're seeing a lot of very short-sighted thinking in how to wring the most worth out of the economy, and they're not thinking about the long-term costs of some of these short-term policies. But that certainly provides an explanation for why the government has a completely blasé attitude about any cybercrime, other than that directed against the government's own computers. They take that pretty seriously. They want cybercrime to force you to do business with the computer security companies. Remember the movie The Net, where it turned out the company selling the security software was behind the hacking that caused everybody to buy the security software. It's not that fantastic an idea. Anyway, apparently there's a new scam out, and it's hitting Dutch internet users. They're getting an email asking them or demanding a payment of a settlement because they have committed piracy on content. More about that when we come back. Aloha America, welcome back to the show, and we're talking about yet another in the seemingly infinite series of scams being perpetrated on the public. And apparently Dutch internet users are receiving letters, and apparently they're paper letters in the mail, saying that they have been detected as committing an act of piracy against this Dutch movie company, and they are ordered to pay a settlement or they will face serious prosecution and jail time. However, the Dutch movie company that appears on the letterhead has gone public saying they've got nothing to do with this. It is an elaborate scam. It's a fraud. So you need to be very, very careful. It's open season on innocent, law-abiding citizens around the world, and nobody seems all that concerned about doing something about it. Okay, we have some callers on the line. Let's start with Gaither in Oklahoma. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, how y'all doing, Mike? I was going to talk to you. My neighbor is just now waking up. I've been awake for 20 years, unfortunately. You know, it seemed like we were by ourselves for a lot of years.
Yes.
And I was telling him how I what really gave me an epiphany of waking up was the Weather Channel. I noticed how they weaponized it. It was just, they scared people to death. I mean, even farmers were freaking out. You know, how they give this long-time forecast, and they would run to the store and empty out the shelves and nothing would happen. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And it was, and I was wondering if you agreed, because I was trying to explain to him that this is something that is, I don't know if it's commercialism or what, but then I started noticing the product placement during the Weather Channel stuff. Like only Fords, and then have a Chevy slide off and smash it into a hill or something. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, it was amazing. And then I was going to check your comment on that topic. And then I have one other topic I want people to know about, is I have a sister-in-law that's a sheriff in South Carolina. And she's been told to pull over people that don't have a lot of tickets because they're less likely to gripe. So if you have a clean record, it don't mean nothing to a cop. In fact, they're going to pull you over faster because you're less likely to go down and gripe being pulled over all the time. You just pay it. But anyway, I was just going to take the comments off the air. Thank you, Mike. Have a good day.
Well, thank you very much here, and that's very disheartening about this, use of traffic laws as a revenue-generating system on the people. And it's come out repeatedly all across the country, even here in Hawaii. The cops literally are on a quota system. And it's not called that, but basically the idea is that our statistical studies are showing this many traffic infractions are happening in your precinct, and if you're not catching a certain percentage of them, you're obviously not performing well in your job. And generally in the last few days of every month is when huge numbers of tickets are being written and the speed traps are set up, and it is revenue generating along with the civil forfeiture laws. Now, as far as the Weather Channel, the Weather Channel has competition, and they may actually be looking at sensationalizing the weather a little bit as a way of drawing their audience. To make it exciting, all of this stuff. And you're right, some of the dire warnings from the Weather Channel can be tied into certain ad campaigns, like flood insurance or emergency preparation. And all media operates that way, where there's always an idea, what are the needs of our advertisers, and we're going to push the stories that are going to help our advertisers. I don't watch the Weather Channel itself. I have some software on my computer. Basically, I like to look at the raw data myself. And I've mentioned before looking at these storm track forecasts during hurricane season, where they'll say there's a hurricane out there, it's heading this way, and they'll have a 5-day predicted track. And beyond 24 hours, it's pretty much worthless because that far end is just whipping around back and forth. But it looks impressive that they have a 5-day forecast. But it really is kind of worthless, to be very honest. You shouldn't really be hitting the panic button until you're 24 hours away from that and it's still pointed at you. Then you start boarding up the windows and so forth and so on. All right, another phone call. Scott in Norfolk. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
You had heard about the March for Trump event coming up March 4th in several states around the country.
No, I hadn't, but thank you for telling us. Is there a website we can go to and get more information about that?
Yes, there is. If you just Google March, the month March for Trump, and what's interesting is earlier this morning, it was the first thing that popped up. Now there's a website that pops up before it saying it's going down, and this is an anti-March for Trump event.
Well, I just searched for it in DuckDuckGo, and the March for Trump was the top entry.
It's put on by a fellow named Peter Boykin, and he's a leader of a group called the Gays for Trump. Now, I looked up his Twitter account, and I see some entries there where he was supporting Trump last year, so it seems legit. But, you know, whenever you see something like this, you don't want to take it for face value.
That's true.
You don't know if it's a setup. And the other thing I wanted to bring up to you, Michael, is since you've been in the movie business, in the entertainment business, and this kind of all different subject, have you noticed that there's a heck of a lot more smoking in these movies than there was before? It seemed like after the tobacco settlement, 10 or 15, 20 years ago?
Yeah.
It seemed to move out of the industry, and now they are smoking cigarettes in every scene they can get away with it.
Well, they're trying to bring smoking back and make it popular again or make it acceptable again. For the longest time, smoking was definitely considered impolite, and now the pendulum's swinging back the other way. Mostly they're pushing the e-cigs as a somehow healthier alternative. And it is a complicated issue because, in a way, the tobacco companies were being accurate when they said tobacco wasn't causing the cancer because it wasn't the tobacco. It was some of the chemicals they were adding to make the cigarettes more addictive, and it was also that cheap mined mineral fertilizer they were using on the tobacco plants, which contained polonium, which was sucked up into the tobacco plants and became part of that cigarette smoke. But there's just like with marijuana, there's actually a positive side to tobacco. People who are smoking tobacco have only half the chance of coming down with Parkinson's or Alzheimer's. Nobody knows why. Nobody's looking, because the big money is in selling medication to people who already have Alzheimer's and Parkinson's.
Well, I agree with you, especially on the vaccine end of it. To try to have an intelligent conversation with somebody who's pro-vaccines is almost not worth it. I donate my time to a homeless charity that is also a homeless ministry, and the pastor of that ministry preaches vaccines. And my brother also is involved in that charity. And I told him, I said, do not get the vaccine, especially the stuff that they are sending you guys. And the pastor thinks that anybody who's against the vaccine is a conspiracy theorist. And I told him, I said, you are against this industry because it tells you that it's okay to kill babies, yet you defend it. You have no questions about the vaccines that they send you. You don't even read the material that's sent with it. You trust them wholeheartedly.
Well, let me insert here for a second, because here's the reality you're dealing with. You're dealing with an individual whose entire life is about beliefs. That's his stock in trade. That's his entire mental model, is what do you believe in? And he's been convinced to believe vaccines are safe. And just like he's not going to look at any of the contradictions and in the Bible that would be cause for legitimate doubt, he's not going to look at the information. I mean, if you want, you can go to the FDA's website and you can get the package inserts where they admit, like the DTaP vaccine can cause autism. But I'm going to tell you right now, he'll look at it and he'll just say, no, you didn't really get this from the... people who are enslaved by beliefs, you really cannot talk with them because they are truly mind slaves. That's the whole point of having belief systems, whether it's religious or educational or political. The reason to enslave people with beliefs is they're now trapped, and they're never going to get out absent an extreme exercise of willpower. So,
what's interesting?
Yeah.
What's interesting is this same medical community. It took over 100 years to convince them that surgeons ought to wash their hands in between surgeries.
Yeah.
I mean, it took over 100 years
yes.
to convince them of something that simple. I mean, so it's mind-boggling that the same industry you would not trust with human life or determine when human life starts or how sacred it is as far as abortions. He has no qualms about injecting a vaccine into a system without knowing what the heck's in it. Or even if it's for the right strain, which oftentimes it's not even for the right strain. But that's beside the point. It's not good to do.
Well, the thing is, the pharmaceutical companies provide financial incentives to the hospitals and the doctors to basically push this product. They've lobbied several states into making these vaccines mandatory, and they rely on the CDC's list of vaccines you should have, and forgetting the fact that CDC is not an impartial, objective observer. They have over 20 patents for vaccines themselves, off of which they're making $4.5 billion a year. So it's all driven by that money, and the actual efficacy and harm of the product is of secondary concern. And you go back and you look at a lot of what is now considered medical quackery, and it's easy to look at it and say how ridiculous it was until you remember that at the time the stuff came on out, yeah, it was believed in. One of the problems I think that we have in the medical community is they are encouraged to have a self-image of being, somehow superior because they have control over life and death and they're there to take care of other humans. And that self-image can sometimes blind them to the possibility they may actually be committing harm. And I know what you're talking about because we used to have a friend who had been a nurse, and we sort of held her hand when she went through the suicide of her husband. But we had the discussion about vaccines, and yeah, she stopped being a trained medical personnel, and she became a religious fanatic. And that's what they're taught in medical school. Never question the vaccines. Never question the vaccines. Anybody who questions vaccines is a conspiracy kook. And it's all about pushing that product. And it's going to be a tremendous fight to break through that wall of belief and get to people. We're starting to get there with Vaxxed and the rest of it. And that huge number of people out there who've got autistic children who are starting to suspect that it was the vaccines who did it. And Donald Trump's son appears to be one of them. Robert De Niro has an autistic child that he thinks may have been damaged by vaccines. And this is becoming a hot-button issue. But anybody who thinks that the medical industry is always perfect and never, ever, ever makes a mistake, you're in a dream world. In fact, as a prelude to my ClimateGate article, let me read you some examples from the past about just how wrong the medical establishment has been about certain things here. Let's see. Here it is. In the 17th century, doctors thought rubbing chicken dung onto your scalp would cure baldness. They thought leeches sucked disease out of patients. Prior to the 1950s, doctors thought proteins carried our heredity. Until the 19th century, doctors thought infection was caused by bad air, which is where we get the term malaria. Now, up until the 1950s, doctors, real medical doctors trained by medical schools, thought that blowing tobacco smoke up your butt was good for you. And that's where we get the phrase blowing smoke up your derriere. And it just goes on and on again. Nobel Prize for lobotomy was considered a therapeutic treatment. Until 2005, doctors thought ulcers were caused by stress. Now, science is not perfect. Science makes mistakes. Unfortunately, the medical industry cultivates an image of perfection and infallibility. Or else people are going to say, I'm not sure I'm going to go to the doctor. I'm just going to wait at home and see if I get better all by myself. And so they deliberately cultivate that image of perfection and infallibility, and anything that threatens that image has to be attacked. And just like people are now realizing Google is not going to give you all the news you need to have when you type in a search term, more and more people are beginning to realize medical mistakes are a big problem. You're far more likely to be killed by your doctor by accident than killed by a terrorist.
I think they say around 250,000 people die every year in the United States.
Yes, they do. And
well, I think what your message is comes down to one word: think.
Yes.
Think.
Think. Don't believe. Think.
And that old saying, "Don't believe everything you see and hear." Don't believe any of it until you think about it, until you check it out. And with the Internet now, Michael...
Don't believe, period. End of discussion. Don't believe. Don't believe. Beliefs are the chains that hold free minds enslaved. No chain of steel ever bound a human being tighter than the chains made of the beliefs we're indoctrinated with as children.
And isn't it more fun to go through life thinking than being in a daze?
It's always worked out for me.
Yeah. Well, you're doing a great job. Thank you, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here, coming up on a commercial break. Before we get there, though, I wanted to share something with you. It's kind of cool. I put a link on WhatReallyHappened.com that goes to a website called The Smart Saw. And what they're selling, and by the way, it's not a paid advertisement. It's an unpaid, not even an endorsement, just a plug, if you will. But it's really kind of cool. They're selling the instructions to build your own computer-driven woodworking tool. They're calling it a smart saw. It's actually more of a milling table. And you can use it to make furniture and everything. They don't sell the parts or anything. You have to get the parts on your own. But I saw this, and I said, this is really kind of cool. In that fantasy life where I'm a man of leisure, I could actually get into this because I was raised in a woodworking culture. By my grandfather, the one who used to get drunk with Richard Nixon. He was a furniture maker in his later years, and he had a woodworking shop literally powered by a water wheel. And that's where I learned my basic carpentry skills. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Last segment of our show on Pauhana Friday. Just now getting word, apparently over in South Dakota, their House has passed a constitutional permitless carry legislation. And it's going to go to the Senate now, and if the Senate passes it, then South Dakota will join the growing number of states where you are allowed to carry a firearm for your personal self-defense without needing a state permit to do it. So I'm expecting the gun grabbers to stage a mass shooting at a school any day now to try and derail this rush toward firearm freedom. But yes, we do have a right to keep and bear arms. And certainly common sense says in a nation where crime is skyrocketing out of control, an armed population can stop that. And, you know, it's amazing all the studies that have been done over the years that show, without question, in areas where citizens are not allowed to have guns, crime explodes. In areas where there's an armed population, crime goes down. But the gun grabbers don't care. The gun grabbers want you disarmed. They want the streets filled with crime because that justifies a growing police force and a police state. They need rapes and robberies and muggings because then it proves how much they need us, to paraphrase from V from Vendetta. Kennewick, Georgia, several years ago, actually passed an ordinance requiring every home to have a gun. Crime dropped by 80%. Contrast that with Chicago, which is held up as the model of the gun control society by the liberals. They're working on overtime picking up all the dead bodies up there. Gun control is this idea that a woman lying raped and strangled with her own pantyhose in an alley is somehow superior to that same woman explaining to the police how her attacker got shot. Personally, I prefer the second scenario. And it's amazing that despite the early feminist movement wanting to empower women, the later feminist movement simply re-victimized them. If you want women to be empowered, teach them how to shoot. I strongly think everybody ought to be given a gun safety course when they're entering their early teens. Where I grew up, you got your first gun at age 12. We didn't have shootings. I mean, outside of the varmints, putting food on the table and stuff, we did have one suicide attempt in all the years I lived in that town in New Hampshire. I think everybody should be taught how to handle a gun safely, that it's not a toy, how to put the round on the target. You'll see crime go away. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. Claire and I have got a bunch of stuff we need to do. Actually, Claire and I need to rest this weekend. We're really working way, way too hard. Anyway, have yourself a good weekend. We'll be back here on the Republic Broadcasting Network next Monday. Until then, stay informed, stay skeptical, drop Google, go to DuckDuckGo. We'll be back on Monday. Aloha, America.